Okay, so here's my challenge tonight. My challenge is to try to wrap this whole thing up, and it's a difficult challenge. My name is Craig Rodrigue. I'm an insurance agent. I sell health insurance for a living, life insurance, health insurance, groups, individuals, Medicare. I serve on the board for NAPA, so that's really my job, has been to study this law for 4 years because I'm the political involvement chair, so my job has been to work with the government in figuring out what's going on. I have to tell you, I had this devastating phone call last night. It was an interesting, devastating phone call to me because I was on a conference call with one of the insurance companies that I work with. Doesn't matter. If it comes up, that's great. If it doesn't, we'll have to do something else. But that's okay. I'm on a conference call with one of the insurance companies I work with, and the insurance company is walking me through the legislation because, as we all know, the healthcare law was about 2,700 pages. We are expecting between 10,000 and 100,000 pages of clarification. We'll talk a little bit about how clarification works, but that's really what's going on. Many people will ask me often, have you read the law? Do you know what it means? And what I try to explain to people is that 2,700 pages that you think you read, that you think you know what the healthcare law says, is really irrelevant. It's the 100,000 pages that matters. Because the healthcare law says simple things in it like essential benefits are to be covered at no cost. That's in the 2,700 pages. It's other people that have decided what's an essential benefit. So we'll talk about that. I think my slides have come up, so I want to start with the premise of the healthcare law because once we understand the premise, it's easier to understand what happened. So we can start with the premise. It all starts right here. A public plan is something that's sponsored by the government and therefore has very low or non-existent administrative cost compared to others. It doesn't have the need to have brokers out selling it. That would be me. And it wouldn't have the need to have a lot of cost and profits the way that a private plan would, so it has that advantage. So what I've done for you is I have the flow chart for your low cost, no overhead, non-existent administrative expense. Is there any way we can get this a little bit to the left so that we can help people understand what's going on here? It would be really funny, except this is true. The problem with our low-cost, non-existent overhead flowchart that you're looking at is it doesn't even include the insurance companies or myself or any of the people that you've ever dealt with. So one of the fun things that we like to do in our flowchart, and it's going to be very difficult, is we always play this great Where's Waldo game. My friend David and I, and David's here with me tonight, we're sitting in the office one day and we're looking at the flowchart and we're going, my God, what is going on here? But we start to try to realize, where's Waldo? My friend David goes, where are the patients on this flowchart? So we start looking for the patients, and you guys can't read this, so when I do this in a room that's small enough for them to see it, I always do it. But just to help you, the patients are way down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And so Dave says, where are the doctors? So the Where's Waldo game is, where are the doctors? The doctors are actually in the bottom left-hand corner. Now, as a flowchart, there's lines going everywhere, so we started figuring out, how do you get to the doctor? Don't you want to know how to get to the doctor? So Dave and I figured it out. From the bottom right-hand corner, you can catch the blue train over to here. From the blue train, you can get on the red train, and the red train goes all the way around the top up here to the IRS. The IRS is very important for our first stop, and here's why. Everybody thought that this was about health care. It was not about health care. The health care law did not mandate or fund a single new doctor or hospital. What it mandated and funded was 17,000 new IRS agents to collect all the taxes and penalties. It was never about health care. Now, from the IRS, you can kind of catch the green train down to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and you've heard a lot about the Secretary of Health and Human Services tonight. From the Health and Human Services, there's only one straight line on the entire flowchart. The straight line is from Secretary of Health and Human Services to the President. Now, from the President, we couldn't quite figure out how we got to the doctor, but near as we can tell, y'all ever play pinball? And things just kind of like bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and eventually end up at the physician. We were told that our healthcare system was unjust. We were told that our healthcare system was not good and that our healthcare system did not care for the American people and that the other plans were just. The Canadian healthcare system covers everybody. The Great Britain healthcare system covers everybody. If I was going to have you judge a healthcare system, how would you judge it? Well, I'm crazy. I judge it by care. I use an odd model, right? I look at things and say, what about cancer survival rates? Do you think cancer survival rates is a way to judge a healthcare system? I thought it was too. This is the percentage of men and women that survive cancer 5 years. You have a 65% in the United States of America chance of surviving cancer for 5 years. 46% in England, 42% in Canada. What about we look at other things, right? Let's look at something else. Percentage of patients diagnosed with diabetes that get treatment within 6 months. 93% in America, 15% in England, 43% in Canada. Did anybody come to the doctor's panel? We did a doctor's panel, and I sat on the doctor's panel, and if anybody was there, one of the doctors, he served in Canada for 5 years as a doctor. And he says, let me tell you why the Canadian numbers are high. We sent everyone to America. One of the biggest tragedies involved in our healthcare reform and President Obama's healthcare law, one of the biggest tragedies is the Canadians don't know where they're going to go to get healthcare. Let's look at some other things. Percentage of seniors needing hip replacement that receive it. 90% in America, 15% in England, 43% in Canada. Percentage of people that are referred to a specialist within a month if you need to see a specialist. 77% of us see it in America, 40% in England, 43% in Canada. There's no measure we can find that makes the other healthcare systems better. There is nothing. MRIs. Let me tell you something. In Canada, if you had a lump in your chest, ladies, and you needed to get a mammogram, it takes 9 months to get a mammogram in Canada today. I'll get you one tomorrow. We could start now, might even be able to get you one by morning, right? Why? There's 71 MRI scanners in America per million people. There's only 14 in England and 18 in Canada. See, the mistake always made in the healthcare law is you hear about denial of care. And the misunderstanding that I had was I thought that denial of care meant we're not going to give you care, but we're going to give you credit. The way denial of care works is nobody gets any care, period. That's denial of care. When we look at the healthcare law and we start asking the question, we'll do this one, the $20 million recertification. I was at a conference not very long ago, the one that I did with the doctors, and a gentleman stands up and says, I unfortunately suffer from gout. And I used to have a medication that cost me $20 a month. I just went and filled my medication. It was $450. Does anybody know why? Doctor says, sure, no problem. The medication you were taking was colchicine. Colchicine had been used in America for decades. It was a highly effective medicine, very low side effects. The ingredients of the medicine had been used for hundreds of years for all sorts of illnesses. It was a phenomenal medicine that worked great, and it cost 8 cents per pill. 8 cents. But the federal government comes along and says, hey, you need to recertify that medication. The company says, recertify it, it'll cost me $20 million to recertify it. They said, we can't recertify an 8-cent medication for $20 million that has no side effects. The government said, you're going to do it or you can't sell it, and told them they couldn't sell it. So this other company comes along with Coltrix. They said, we'll pay the $20 million. So they pay the $20 million. They become the only gout medication that's certified that can be sold in the United States of America. It's $5 a pill. You take 3 a day. That's $450 a month. We're now suffering things because of the healthcare law in America that we never suffered before. Mass shortages in medications. LASIK, morphine. I've had 2 anesthesiologists tell me they showed up to work and there was nothing to put the people to sleep with. What am I supposed to do? Sing them a lullaby? Give them a good right hand? Maybe they should go see a boxing coach, right? Antibiotics, benzodiazepines. All of these medications are shortages because the healthcare company, the president wants his bribe. See, when we talk about taxes within the healthcare law, and we can talk a long time, there's 21 taxes, but we need to look at simple things, right? Pharmaceutical companies now owe $4.2 billion a year just for the right to sell drugs in America. Now, I call it a fine instead of a tax because, see, taxes are percentage of revenue or percentage of profit, correct? If any of you ever ran a company, we'd say, hey, you owe 5% of revenue or you owe 10% of profit in tax. They didn't do that. They just looked at the pharmaceutical companies and said, you're writing a check for $4.2 billion a year. I don't care if you made money. I don't care if you lost money. I don't even care if your revenue was $300 million. Cut me a check. Health insurance carriers have $16.2 billion a year in fines just for the right to sell health insurance in America. Medical device makers, 2.3% excise tax on medical devices. Now, in our industry, we started saying, what's a medical device? And we started thinking it would be walker, pacemaker, something like that. They actually defined it as anything a doctor touches in their office. Syringes, gauze pads, Band-Aids, anything you can think of that a doctor has touched in their office has been defined as a medical device, and they owe 2.3% tax on it. I'm sitting with a pediatrician and she says, oh my God, Craig, I do $20 million, I do $20,000 a month worth of preventative care vaccines in my office. Times 2.3% is a $460 a month tax on her, and she's not seen the first sick patient yet. The scariest thing in the whole healthcare law, there was 2 presentations on it, and it's the $2. Why is the $2 the scariest? The $2 from every insured person is going to fund the organization that you saw that is going to decide what treatments we can get or not get. That's the one that said women can't have mammograms, guys can't have PSA tests, and on and on and on it will go. Why it's so scary is exactly what Jill DeVecchio was talking about. If comparative effectiveness market research or that board says women in their 40s can't have a mammogram, it's as if God himself has spoken it. And she can stand there and say that I will still do the mammogram. I'm not going to follow the guideline, but the insurance company can't pay for it even if they want to. This law was never about health care. It's a misnomer. It was always about control. What the problem with the health care law is, why did they want health care? The reason why they wanted health care was because once I control your health care, there's absolutely nothing about your life that I cannot control. Now, that's a huge statement, and I always like to say, hey, let's check me. Come on, Craig, you're crazy. Nothing about my life you cannot control. Well, let's see if I'm right. If I pay for your health care, do I have a right to talk to you about smoking? That's a no-brainer, right? How about obesity? Piece of cake. How about how many children you have? See, I have to not only pay for the child to be born, I have to pay for the child for the rest of his life. One of the first executive orders that President Obama signed when he took office was to fund the organization in China that's killing the babies. You know, China's only allowed to have one child. You're only allowed to have one child in China. Somebody has to go kill the babies and perform the abortions. We're funding them. It was one of the first executive orders that the president signed. Life has a funny way of connecting itself. I read this awesome magazine called World Magazine. Anybody ever heard of World Magazine? World Magazine's phenomenal. It's a Christian news magazine. So World Magazine, I highly recommend you all get it. It covers all kinds of topics. Everything from sports, to government, to state issues, to what's happening around the world, to wars, to religious issues, to even what's happening in churches. Read long articles about what's happening in your church in World Magazine. So a couple of months ago, I'm reading a World Magazine about how India is sterilizing 1 million women a year. They're actually forced sterilizations. They're just grabbing women on the street and sterilizing them. One night that the reporter was there, they sterilized 80 some odd women in one night. It worked out to 2.5 minutes a woman to do a sterilization. So the reporter's trying to figure out, why are we sterilizing these women? And it was being paid for by a liberal organization in America. So they go to the liberal organization in America and they say, why are you paying to sterilize women in India? And the liberal organization says, and I quote, well, certainly less people on the planet would be good for global warming. Now, who's heard that under the health care law, you're now going to pay, you get birth control pills at no cost? Anybody heard that? Well, I told you the 2,700 pages was irrelevant. What's really relevant is the 100,000 pages that comes after it, correct? The 100,000 pages was done by Kathleen Sebelius. Kathleen Sebelius is like God. The way Kathleen Sebelius works and the way that this program works is she says, I'm thinking about giving birth control to women, and then people will give input. The insurance companies might say it'll cost us money, or we can't do it, or the doctors, or whatever. And then Kathleen Sebelius just says, this is what it is. And when she says it, it's like God has spoken it. So the other day, these essential benefits that are covered at no cost all started in August. So about the end of July, I get my list of essential benefits that are covered. And the essential benefits include things that we'd expect. Cholesterol, blood pressure, those kinds of things. It also included a lot of things that I didn't expect. Breastfeeding supplies. That one perplexed me because I thought the whole point of breastfeeding was that you didn't need supplies. I guess I had my kids a little before the supply stage. STD diagnosis, HPV, HIV test, abuse counseling, birth control pills, and guess what showed up on the list? Sterilization at no cost. See, the healthcare law is not about healthcare, it's about control. I said there's nothing about your life I can't control. We've talked about smoking, we've talked about obesity, we've talked about having children, right? It won't be long before the government will tell you, have more than one child, you owe a more than one child fee because you're burdening the system. Who thinks that sounds crazy? That's actually the rule in China. The way it works in China is you can have one child. If you have more than one child, you owe the fee. $40,000. If you can't pay the fee, you're a burden to the system. We're killing your baby. How long will it be before we owe the fee? Now, I said nothing, and I always like to check myself. How about tourism? Who thinks I can control tourism with health care? Oh, Craig, you done gone crazy now. I think the lights are getting to me, right? Ooh, it's really hot. Who's lived in Florida a long time? Okay, so for those of you that have lived in Florida a long time, who remembers when the Canadians used to come for 6 months every winter? Have you noticed that the Canadians don't come for 6 months every winter? The reason why is the Canadian government's sitting around and they're saying, I can just picture it. You know, Charlie. That would be a Canadian accent. Now you know why I'm not an actor. You know, Charlie, it's not so good for us to have our citizens in Florida for 6 months every winter. We need to stop that. What could we do about it? I have an idea. You leave the country longer than 63 days, you lose your health insurance. There is nothing about your life I cannot control once I control your health insurance. There's two truths everyone needs to know. We've talked about taxes. There's multiple taxes. So there's really two truths I wish you would leave here with, and we're going to start with the first one. Do businesses pay taxes? Yes. No. Most everyone says yes. A couple of people say no. Who would like to take the yes side? I need some help. Volunteer from the audience. Yes, ma'am. In the white shirt in the 1, 2, 3, 4th row, you win the prize. Ma'am, congratulations, you're now in charge of Coca-Cola. And much like New York City, who heard that New York City outlawed large sodas? Do you know what else they outlawed that nobody's talking about? Baby formula. Baby formula. See, once the government is in control, they do not stop. So I might say, I want the government to make her not do something. And I go, oh, that's good for me. She's not going to do X. But they aren't going to stop. So the way the baby formula works is, you're not allowed to have baby formula. You have to go ask for permission. And when you ask for permission, you're to be chastised and told how wrong you are for trying to give your baby formula because it's not good for them. I know, I get so much, what? All right, ma'am, so you're in charge of Coca-Cola, and the federal government has decided that sodas are bad, and we're going to tax your soda $1 per can of soda. What are you going to do? Raise the price by how much? So, we have now learned the first truth in life that we wish everyone understood. Businesses do not pay taxes, they merely collect taxes. Because the business has no money except the money it got from us. Any of you ever been to the big tax marches in downtown Orlando? We've had the fair tax rallies and the tax day protests. Anybody ever been there? One guy in the back, so if you've ever been to the tax protest in downtown Orlando, there's one big, tall, crazy guy in the back talking to the communists. Yes, I said communists because they will admit to you that they are communists. So I'm in the back talking to the communists, and the communists will always say the same thing: businesses don't pay enough in taxes, evil corp doesn't pay its fair share. Did you know that even the hardened communists, when you walk them through that little model right there, begin to understand the truth? The problem that we have in life is because we do not know the truth, we are easily deceived. Now, they always get frustrated and they'll say, I can't talk to you, you frustrate me. But the reason why is I'm beginning to break down the bonds of what they thought to be true and showing them that it is not. Businesses do not pay taxes, they merely collect taxes. And when we say evil corp doesn't pay enough in taxes, what we're really saying is, I would like to pay more taxes through Coca-Cola. I would like to pay more taxes through the gas company. The second truth that we all need to know is evil corp's evil shareholder profits. The communists will always say to me, evil corp makes too much shareholder profits. Who's heard the president talk about that, right? Shareholder profits. Quick question. Who are the owners of evil corp? You are. How could you be the owners of evil corp? Do you have a retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, a Roth, a SEP, any other investment account? What do those investment accounts own? They own evil corp, the gas company, the oil company, the Coca-Cola, AT&T, Wall Street, right? And where does evil corp's evil shareholder profits go? Where do they go? To the shareholders. You. Right back to your IRA, right back to your 401k, right back to your savings or retirement account. Then what are you saying when you say evil corp makes too much shareholder profits? I don't ever want to be able to retire. I want my 401k to go down. I don't ever want to make money in my life. It's two truths everyone needs to know. I'm just about out of time, so I want to close with one thing because Chris Ann Hall was 100% right. We don't know the story of our founding fathers. We don't know what they did. There's a whole argument that's happening now that says, what could the founding fathers possibly have known about life today? Therefore, what they did is irrelevant. Who's heard the argument? The reason why is we don't know what the founding fathers were doing. If we study the founding fathers, what we realize is the founding fathers were trying to control something that will never change. The nature of man. I have a nature towards greed. I have a nature towards lust. I have a nature towards being power hungry or lazy. The only question we have to ask is, am I any different than a man that lived 200 years ago? No, I'm not. Am I any different than a man that's going to live 200 years from now? That's why the founding fathers were right. The founding fathers said the last person that should ever do charity, ever, is the government. Because if the government does charity, it'll create laziness in the people. Were they right? Yes. How could they possibly have known? Because it's the nature of man. If we don't know the truth, we're easily deceived. Learn your Constitution. What was the Declaration of Independence all about? Why is it called a John Adams and not a George Washington? Where is it written, manly firmness? The founding fathers were so brilliant, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, and that they were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these rights were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then they write manly firmness? You gotta find it. It's in the Declaration of Independence. Become intrigued by your history. What separated the United States from every country that ever existed before it? There's a book called The 5,000-Year Leap, and the premise of the book is this. We can look at the world for 5,000 years prior to America, and life on earth was unchanged. Same standard of living, same tools, same livelihood. Along comes our founding fathers. They write our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, and within 200 years, we go from a stick plow to landing on the face of the moon. What did the founding fathers do that so radically changed the world? And where did these ideas come from? What are the 28 principles that they used to create the United States of America? What separated us from every country that ever existed before us? You know, prior to America, your rights were given to you by man. I gave you the right to own the cow. I've decided you don't have the right to own it anymore. And along comes our founding fathers and they say, I'm just about done. Along come our founding fathers and they say, a certain amount of rights were given to you by God. And if God gave you the right, man doesn't even have the ability to have a conversation about taking it from you. In New York City stands the Statue of Liberty. At the bottom of the Statue of Liberty is written, "Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Right? The problem is it's always read with this Mother Teresa, sissified kind of voice, right? When we read our history, what we learn is the Statue of Liberty really says, send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I will make the greatest nation that ever existed on the face of the planet with them. I will show you that it was you and not these people. I will show you what happens when we set a people free. Send me your tired, send me your poor, send me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And what I learned is within 3 years, we became the envy of the world. Do you know how incomprehensible that is? 3 years, the rest of the world is walking around and saying, what is going on in America? Who are these people? Anybody ever heard of de Tocqueville? So de Tocqueville writes this, and I promise you I'll close. But this is so important because the pastors are called to make our nation great. We are called to make our nation great. I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commonest harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and the power. America is great because she is good, and if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great.